Okay, thank you, Madison, and thank you for everyone that is on the call today. I really appreciate the opportunity to lead today's money conversation. So, as I hope everyone knows, I am an independent personal finance educator, certified through the National Financial Educators Council. So, I am not affiliated with any investment firm or bank or any institution. My talks are solely based on my own experiences and opinions and the experiences of a lot of my coaching clients. So, I am not a financial advisor. And it is highly encouraged to do your own research before making any financial decisions. So that is my disclaimer. So with that disclaimer, now we can begin our talk about money and today's economy. So our objectives for today's talk, we want to focus on three things: understanding inflation and how it impacts our everyday life, understanding what market fluctuations are, what they mean for the everyday average investor. And the third thing, which is the most important part of the conversation, is what can we actually do about the problems? Because we don't want to only discuss the issues. The financial media and the media in general already does that. And if you are on social media, I'm sure your social media feed also takes care of that. So we don't need to add to that, but we want to learn how to master the solutions and making sure that we are setting up our finances to weather whatever is going on in the world economy. Okay, so most of today's talk is going to focus on equipping us with the skills to excel in the art of what I like to call the spending plan, aka our budget, or a value-based budgeting plan. So similar to my last conversation, is we're going to be packing a lot of information. It's going to be a lot of good information in this one short hour, and definitely, we'll take questions at the end too. So I wanted to begin by making it really clear that I mentioned the financial media earlier. So the media is not your friend, and I don't have any leanings towards the left or the right. I'm just talking about in general, the media, especially the financial media, is not our friend. It is all negative. If you compare the number of times that you listen to the news, you listen to a clip, you read in the paper, what do you hear? The media reports doom and gloom when it comes to the economy, the market. We hear that the sky is falling. We hear that this time it's different from all the other times, right? People, every time there is a crisis, when it was COVID, we heard, but this time it's different. This is a pandemic. People are dying. And again, the economy has risen after all of the different crises, crashes, pandemics. The economy will continue to rise. So I'm not going to add to the negativity, but I am going to point it out. But like I said, it is not my job to add to letting us know about all of the terrible things that are happening. But it is someone's job, so we just want to be very aware. It is someone's job to have viewers and readers and subscribers to be glued to the news channel or to the newspaper, right? And people aren't really going to, be glued to the TV and constantly on their phones if they're just hearing the voice of reason, which is just saying everything is going to be okay in the talking specifically about the stock market. Okay. And actually, you can do an experiment, and we are actually working on this. My husband and I, we are getting together all of the different video clips, news clips from the different media reports talking about the market, the economy, the stock market in general, from every administration. So we're not just talking about the current administration or the last one, but all of the ones where we can find media clips, and we're putting them together And I'll just tell you the ending. Every single one sounds like it could be said as of today. Like it could have been recorded today because, you know, they all pretty much sound the same. Okay. So before we start getting into this, let's work backwards, okay? So the goal of all of my talks is to get people to understand that they can be financially independent. You can be financially independent. So anyone bringing in an income, especially living, I'm talking specifically about people living in the USA that are bringing in an income, you have the opportunity to reach financial independence. And of course, financial independence, it's gonna look different for every person. The lower your expenses, the less you'll need to have invested to eventually live off of. And just a quick overview, when we say, or when I say financial independence, I'm saying when you have 25 times the amount that it costs for you to run your household for the year. So if your expenses are very little, it might only, you know, it might only cost you $30,000 a year to take care of yourself financially. So then you take 30,000, you multiply that by 25, and that's the number that you need to have invested, and then you are considered financially independent. So then you can draw down 4% a year and you keep the rest invested, and that's the definition of financial independence. And of course, if it costs more to run your household, so let me just take out my calculator. Let's just say for my household, it costs me $100,000 a year to run my household. You know, maybe I have a big family, maybe I have lots of kids, or whatever the reason is. It costs me $100,000 a year to run my household in the way that I want to live. So I would multiply that by 25. Oh, I didn't need my calculator. That's $2.5 million. So that's how much I would need if I wanted to be considered financially independent. Basically, now you are work optional because you have enough money to cover your expenses in your investment account. And if you draw down 4% a year, that gives you $100,000 a year. So hopefully everyone understands how that works. You're considered financially independent when you have 25 times your annual expenses invested in the market. And of course, you might have that in real estate as well. Some people own a lot of real estate, and they're collecting enough rent from their their tenants, and so that can cover their annual expenses. But I'm specifically talking about investing in the stock market. So that's where my specialty will come in. Okay. So like I said, we want to work backwards. So now that we understand what financial independence is, and now we're like, okay, we want to get there. And so before we talk about, everything that's going on in the market, first of all, what exactly is the market, right? When the current President Trump, when he was, campaigning and before he was president and people were, deciding who they were going to vote for, I talked to a lot of people, both sides, some people, Republicans, Democrats, some people for, the VP Kamala Harris, and of course, some people for the current president. And what I heard from a lot of people who were planning to vote for the current President Trump was that they were saying he is the best for the economy. And I don't fault anyone for wanting to have the best economy, right? We all want that. However, this is what I want to point out. A lot of the people that I was speaking to, I would ask them the question, I would say, are you invested in the market? So you're telling me that that's your reason. And again, no bias. I'm just talking about what actually the conversations that I've had. So people were saying, this is my main reason for voting this way, because I want to be a part of the prosperity of the market. And so I would ask them as a follow-up question, what are you invested in? What stocks do you hold? And surprisingly, a lot of the people that I spoke to were not invested in the stock market. And the reason that they weren't invested in the stock market is because they didn't fully understand how to go about it, or they were thinking they didn't have quite enough money to start investing. Or in this other thing, we call it paralysis analysis, right? Or, oh no, I said it backwards. Analysis paralysis, right? You're thinking about it so much, you're analyzing it so much that you're trying to make the most perfect decision. So you're paralyzing yourself and you're not making any decision because you're still trying to figure out what to do best. And then years can go by and you're still not invested in the market. And so what I hope everyone gets from this talk is the confidence to invest in the market and to do it right away, because what we're going to learn is that it's not so much about timing the market, but you want to make sure that you have as much time in the market as possible. Okay, so just to clarify, because sometimes I go off on tangents, but just to clarify what I just mentioned is that it doesn't really make sense to say, oh, I'm voting for this person because of what they are going to do to bring prosperity via the economy and the market, and you're not even a part of that market. So I agree, there is prosperity to be made. There is wealth to be made in the stock market, but if you aren't participating in it, then you're not going to receive any of the benefits. Okay, so it's so important that everyone that has money coming in, make sure that you allocate some of that money to investing in the stock market. And today, the year, it's currently May 29th, 2025. The market has never been more accessible than it is today. You do not need to use a financial advisor. You can go straight to the brokerage account. You can do it online. You don't even have to talk to anyone, right? You can do everything online. You just need a bank account to attach to your brokerage account, and you can be invested in the market as early as today if you are not already. Okay, so the market is the most accessible path to wealth building in the USA. And like I said, basically everyone has access to it in America. Okay. So the best performing companies in the USA, we have access to them. We can be part owners of the best performing companies in the United States when we buy shares of stocks or equities. So when I say stocks, equities, it means the exact same thing. It is a part ownership of that company. So when you think about it, sometimes we don't really think about what's behind the different shares that we own, but it's a real company behind the stock that you own. There are real people. There's a CEO, a CFO, there's workers, there's researchers, there's engineers, there's all types of people who are, working on behalf of that company to grow it. And if you are invested in that company, if you own a share of stock, they're working for you. And that's a wonderful thing, right? So when a company goes public, they offer their shares to the public, and we can buy them. And so you can even buy a share of a company. I always talk about, buying stocks and index funds. But I think, like, for the most part, usually an index fund is like $3,000. But you can buy an ETF, and some ETFs cost as little as $1. Okay. An ETF stands for an exchange traded fund. So maybe you're going onto the brokerage account and you might be looking at the mutual funds and the index funds, and you're like, oh my goodness, I didn't realize it cost $3,000 to get started. Go to the part of the website where it says ETF. That stands for exchange traded fund. But you can find, like I said, ETF. Some of them you can start with $1. Okay, so that's why I said it's accessible to everybody. Okay, so we want to be invested in the market, and I'm also going to talk about the mindset that you need to have when you are invested in the market, because like I talked about before with the financial media, they're just a part of it, but there's always going to be reasons for you, the culture, and everything else around us, all of the other voices and talking heads and papers, everything that we can consume when it comes to the media, things that we can read, are going to give us reasons to be scared and worried and maybe say, take your money out of the market, or maybe now is not the right time to invest in the market. But I'm here to tell you that you want to be investing all the time. Okay, so we call it having an investor, a long-term investor mindset. Okay, and that means you are always going to be purchasing shares of stock in the market no matter what is going on. Okay, and what we call that is dollar cost averaging, or DCA. So dollar cost averaging basically means that you are committing a portion of every one of your paychecks, or you are committing to say every month or on a consistent basis. So sometimes people get paid, every 2 weeks, or maybe you get paid once a month. Or maybe you're going to say at the end of every month or at the beginning of every month. But basically, you are choosing a time period to be consistent, to say every so often. So let's just say in my case, it's every month. And I'm going to say every month, I am going to allocate a portion of my paycheck into the stock market. Okay. So when it's down, when the market is down, I am investing. When the market is up, I am investing. So it does not matter what is going on in the market. It does not matter to me what the news says. It doesn't matter if I turn on any news station. I know we've got some news stations that lean left, some that lean right, right? So it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter which news source I'm listening to. They're all going to be telling me things that are going to cause me anxiety and fear, okay? That is a given. So you have to understand as an investor that is always going to be the case. And you have to basically say, I need to have the mindset, I need to have the tough skin, the thick skin, or a strong mindset that says, I know this is going to happen and I'm going to invest anyways. Regardless of what the news says, I'm still going to invest, okay? Now, another thing, you might be investing in individual stocks, okay? Like you might say, okay, I'm doing my research and, I'm reading everything. And because of my research, I'm going to go with this individual stock. I am not a fan of investing in individual stocks. I am a huge fan, a huge proponent of index funds, INDEX, index funds. Whenever I talk about investing, I always talk about index funds, and that is how I personally invest, because index funds are like the best thing ever. They were started by a man named Jack Bogle with Vanguard. Okay, so Vanguard, and it's also one of the reasons, and of course I have no affiliation with Vanguard. I wish I did. I wish they would pay me, because I speak about them all the time when I'm talking to investors or potential investors. But anyways, they basically started the index fund. And so the index fund is so awesome. And I will tell you why. So individual stocks can definitely cause you to worry or panic, right? Because they could go up, they could go down. The company could be here one day and the next day they're not here anymore, or there is a scandal with the CEO, right? Or there's a scandal with something else that the company did, right? There's so many reasons why a company's sales could drastically go down. They changed a policy, they implemented a new policy and people don't agree with it. They're being boycotted. There's so many reasons, right? And so individual stocks are risky, okay? So the reason I like index funds is because, oh my gosh, I mean, so many reasons. But let's start with number one, index funds. Oh, I'm sorry, let me give you an example of what an index fund is. So let's just say I have a jar. It's a clear jar, okay? And inside, when I'm usually doing in-person classes, I'll fill it with Skittles, okay? So I have a clear jar and it is filled with Skittles. And so the Skittles represent different companies that are publicly traded, okay? So I've got a bunch of different companies in my index fund. So when I purchase an index fund, I'm purchasing the whole jar, Okay, so my favorite index fund, it is called VTSAX. VTSAX. That is my index fund of choice. And I'm going to be completely transparent. I have 100% of my equities in VTSAX. So when I go to invest, 100%, all of the money goes towards me buying shares of VTSAX. So the reason that I like VTSAX is because it is diversified. And you may, and it's VTSAX, it represents one index fund, but inside that index fund, it is the total VTSAX. V stands for Vanguard, okay? Because remember, that's the brokerage firm that I am using is called Vanguard. If I was using Fidelity, it would start with an F, okay? I'm not sure what the ticker symbol is for the Fidelity total market fund is, but it begins with an F, right? And then of course, Charles Schwab would be different. But like I said, I use Vanguard, so we're going to stick with the Vanguard funds. So VTSAX is the total stock market index fund. So inside of my jar with the Skittles, I've got 3,564 different companies that I'm invested in. The total stock market is all of the companies in the total stock market. Okay, so that's pretty incredible. And so I own a piece of every company in that's publicly traded on the stock market. Okay, so if that isn't diversified, then I don't know what is. Okay, so it's inherently diversified because it's giving me a share of every company. Now, another thing to know about index funds is that they are cap weighted. Okay, so cap weighted means that the biggest and the most profitable companies are going to make up a larger percentage of my portfolio. Okay, so the biggest and best companies, I'm going to have a bigger portion of them. Okay, because it's cap weighted. And because I have a big percentage of the biggest and best companies, think about it. Who are the biggest and best companies? They are also doing business overseas. So sometimes people might say, well, I want to be also an international funds, right? And you're thinking like, well, VTSAX, that's just American companies, but shouldn't we be invested internationally? Think about who the biggest companies are, the most successful. Aren't they doing business overseas? They're headquartered in the USA. Yes, they are. But because they are so big, they have got offices, branches, research and development, facilities all over the world. And they have customers all over the world. So these same companies are diversified and they are international. Okay. So you don't have to worry about those things. Okay. Because it's just inherent in how an index fund works. Okay. So the rate that I invest is I do buy and hold. Okay. So like I said, as much as I can every month, I'm buying shares into the stock market. When am I selling them? I'm not selling them. I'm keeping them. I want to keep them for as long as possible. I'm buying and I'm accumulating the wealth. Okay. I am personally in my wealth accumulation stage. There's basically like two stages. You're in wealth accumulation where you're trying to build the wealth. And then, once you get older and you're closer to retiring, you're going to be in the wealth preservation, right? So you're either building or you're preserving the wealth. So currently I'm in my wealth building stage. So that's why I have 100% of my allocation is in equities, is in stocks. So currently I don't have bonds right now. Okay. When would I have bonds? So maybe some people listening, maybe you are approaching retirement. So when you are approaching your retirement, then you can think about selling some of your stocks for bonds. Okay. And guess what? There's a total bond market, just like there is a total stock market. I think it's called VBTLX, but it stands for the Vanguard Total Bond Market Index Fund. Okay. and the total bond market income or fund, it provides income. Okay. So when you get older and you're closer and you're like, okay, retirement is on the horizon, that's when you get to the point where you can change your asset allocation. So again, I'm just talking about myself right now. I'm 100% stocks. When I get closer to retirement, I will get some bonds. Okay. And I'll have the total bond market. Okay. And then of course, and this is for everybody, you also need to have some cash. Okay. Because as we have seen, you are going to have some unpredictability. There's going to be a crisis. There's going to be, the sky is falling. You're going to hear it. And it does affect the economy. So I even though I'm talking about this in such a way, I'm not making light of real problems, because I know people get laid off. I know hours get reduced when all of this uncertainty is happening. So I absolutely understand that that is reality for us, for all of us, right? So what I am saying is we need to prepare for the uncertainty of not just the market, but the whole economy. Okay. So that's why it is so important. If you are pursuing this path of financial independence, it starts with a strong foundation. So part of having a strong foundation is having cash reserves. Okay. So it's so important to have an emergency fund, maybe 3-6 months, closer to retirement. Maybe you're going to be like, well, I need maybe like a year or 2 years of living expenses just sitting in cash. Okay. Because maybe when I retire, the market is going to be down. So then I'm going to live off of my cash or my bonds until the market recovers. Okay. So if you don't understand how the market works, you're going to be panicking, right? When you hear the news and you hear the media. And so I have seen this personally. A lot of people that I knew, and I saw it all over my news feed, my social media news feed, people were like, oh my gosh, tariffs, oh my gosh, this, oh my gosh, Trump. And people are like, I'm going to sell because look, he's going to tank the market, and I'm going to sell. I'm going to get out now before he does further damage. And the people that got out, they are timing the market. And then when you get out of the market, you don't know when to get back in. So when you're timing the market, you have to be right twice. Okay. You have to know when to sell, and you have to know when to get back in. Okay. That is very hard to do, right? And so most people, like 99% of the people, do not have a crystal ball, and they're not going to know when is the best time to get out and also when to get back in. So what happens is people get out of the market because they feel scared and they feel anxious, and they're like, I don't know how low this is going to go, so I'm going to get out now. And then once they're out, and then what happens? The market goes back up. And then when they get back into the market, because you have to buy back into the market, you're buying back in at a premium. So you're paying so much extra money to get back in. And if you just had stayed in the market, you would have reaped the benefits of seeing your stocks increase in value. But instead, you sold at a loss, and now you're getting back in and you're paying more than you should. Because how does the market work in stocks? You want to buy low, right? You want to buy it for a low price, and you want to sell it for a high price. But when you get out of the market early, because you are, you're making decisions on emotions, then you buy back in at a premium. So you're buying high, right? But you're supposed to buy low. So hopefully everyone understands that. Okay. So like I said, mindset is so important. So again, just speaking for myself, when the stock market was going down, my husband and I said, can we look at our current budget, and can we squeeze any extra money out of our budget so that we can invest even more into the stock market? So we heard the same news that everyone else was hearing. We heard, this is going to happen with this administration. We've never seen this before. This time it's different. They're like, yeah, but he's implementing this and he's implementing that. And so all of the stuff that we were hearing, other people were saying, I'm going to sell, I'm going to get out of this mess. But we were thinking, because we have a different mindset, we were thinking, do we have any extra money that we can squeeze from our budget so we can buy even more stocks right now because the stocks are currently on sale. So when the market goes down, you have to have the mindset that the market is on sale. You can buy even more stocks. So like, remember I said dollar cost averaging? So dollar cost averaging, what it looks like in my household is, I'm just gonna give you an example number. So let's just say every month we invest $100 in the stock market. So we buy $100 worth of VTSAX, of the total stock market index fund. So what we were doing is, can we squeeze out an extra $25 from our budget? Because now this is where the wealth is made. When the market is down and you are buying low, you're getting even more stock. So the goal is to, buy these stocks and just buy more and more and more of them, okay? Because they're going to increase in value. The more that you hold, the better. And so when the market is down, I could take that same $100 that I invest every year, but I'm going to get more shares for that same $100. I'm going to get more when the market is down, okay? So that's how people that have that wealthy and long-term investor mindset, when they see the market go down, they're like, it's a sale, right? Just like at a grocery store or any store, when there's a sale, your dollar goes further because you can buy more with the same dollar, okay? So that's how we want to look at investing, okay? The other thing that I want to mention is that if you need your money in 5 years or less, that money should not be invested. So again, with everything going on in the news and people were talking about, oh my gosh, but I'm retiring, or this, this is my 401k, this is my retirement money, this is my nest egg. So you should know now that if you need your money in 5 years or less, some of that money needs to be out of the market, okay? Keep that money in a high yield savings account or a money market account. So you have different money buckets for different reasons, okay? So the money that's in the savings accounts, when I say savings, I mean a high yield savings account or a money market account, because that's going to give you a little bit extra interest than with a regular savings account, okay? So we don't want all of our money in a high yield savings account, but we want just enough, a little bit, to get us through in case when I do retire, just in case the market does crash, okay? Because I don't want to sell my stocks yet, right? Or all of them. So I want to have some money set aside, my reserves, my cash reserves, to get me through until the stock market is back where it needs to be, okay? So that's why it's so important to have cash, to have investments, and it's different, right? And then of course, the closer you are to retirement, then you would want to be looking at bonds as well, okay? So 5 is my number, okay? And again, if you talk to another financial educator or financial advisor, they might give you maybe slightly different advice, but you have to do what works for you, right? We say personal finance is personal, so everyone has to do what works with them. But the goal is to not be emotional when it comes to making these money decisions. That's why I love the work that we do, because we're giving people a framework. So we are saying this is the pathway. This is the road to financial independence. As long as you stay on this road, you will reach financial independence. And then the problem comes is you have other people's voices in your head, right? And you hear from other people, and you hear from the media, and you just hear from the newspaper. You turn on social media and all you hear is, you should be scared, you should be worried, this time it's different. And so if you hear all that stuff, you might be like, man, maybe I shouldn't be on this path anymore. Maybe I should do something different, right? But once you get off this path, you're not going to have the same results, okay? So please, as much as you can, stay on the path, okay? Because so many people, they got out of the market when they heard the word tariff, they heard this, they sold their investments. They did not expect for the market to go back up as quickly as it did, okay? So you want to maintain a winning strategy, but leaving the market and getting back in is not a winning strategy. It's an emotional strategy, okay? The other thing I want to mention, like I said, I'm a huge fan of index funds, and I use Vanguard. And so you can do another reason I like index funds is because they're not actively managed. Okay. So a lot of times if people are working with an advisor, they might have maybe all of their investments or a huge part of them. It's called AUM, and it stands for assets under management. So if you are hiring a professional, like a financial advisor or someone to manage your investments, you have to be very aware of how much you are paying in fees. Okay. So I don't have any assets under management. Okay. Because I'm going directly to the brokerage account and I'm buying index funds. Okay. However, you could have actively managed accounts with Vanguard. So just because your brokerage account is Vanguard, it doesn't mean that they're only doing index funds. You can absolutely have assets under management. But look at the fees, okay? Fees are so important when we're talking about investing. You've got to be aware of the fees. And I'll give you an example. Let's just say I have a $5 million portfolio. I've got $5 million invested, and I have a fee, an asset under management fee of 1%. Okay. So you might think, oh, 1%, that's not a lot of money. I am going to have, of that $5 million, I'm paying 1.5 million to my investor, the financial advisor, right? If I'm paying a fee. So it might look like, oh, 1%, that's not a lot. That's $1.5 million on a $5 million portfolio. Okay. And let's just say the fee is 1.5%, 1.5%. That's $2 million out of my 5 million. Isn't going to me and my family, but it's going to the account, okay, or the account advisor. So I like to always put it out there. Of course, do your own research, right? And I'm not against financial advisors. Sometimes, it might come across like, oh, she's saying never work with a financial advisor. I like to work with fee-based financial advisors, okay? And that cost more upfront because you're paying them like on an hourly basis. But sometimes when I'm talking to people that have assets under management, they don't even know how much they're paying in fees, because a lot of times you're not going to see it directly. It's coming off on the back end, okay? And it's all like integrated into it, and sometimes it's hard to find. So just be really aware. And if you're not sure, you should try to find out that information. How much am I paying if I have assets under management? And I just gave you an example. And sometimes fees are even higher than that. So just be aware, okay? So we're here today to talk about, everything, all the craziness that's going on in the world. There are things that we cannot control, okay? You cannot control what the president will do. This president or any other president, right? We do not have the power to control what the current administration is doing. We do not have the power to change inflation, right? The rise of inflation, it's happening. We don't have the power to stop that. The feds, they can raise interest rates, right? We cannot control any of those things, right? But what can we control? What can I control? I can control my own level of inflation. We call it lifestyle inflation, right? So lifestyle inflation is something I can control. My actions with my money, whether or not I engage in doing a spending plan every month, whether or not I am investing, whether or not I am following a plan to get out of debt. Those are things that I can control. So we need to focus on what can we control, because we cannot control those outside things. We cannot control the president, the administration, the Congress, all of those things. Yes, we can vote. Yes, we can write letters. Yes, we can advocate, and we should do those things, right? Those are part of being, an engaged, active citizen. But it's so important to not neglect our personal finances and realize the power that you have as an individual, because you have so much power. And we have worked with so many people who weren't doing any of this stuff. They weren't investing. They weren't following a budget or a savings plan. A spending plan. They weren't saving money. They didn't have a plan to get out of debt. And so, of course, they're so at risk. You're basically living life and you're totally exposed to everything that the economy and the market and just all the outside influences, that all, is going to come down on you. But if I am taking care of what I can take care of, which is living below my means, right? Investing the rest. I always like to say that the path to wealth or financial independence, it is not hard. I mean, it's not complicated. It's not complicated. It's really simple. And if you break it down into two, if it's a recipe and you're boiling it down to the two basic parts of the recipe, it's one, live below your means. So that means whatever you're bringing in, you can't spend it all. You need to save some of it for your future, right? Some of that money needs to go towards paying off debt. Some of that money needs to go towards your future expenses that you need to save up for. Some of it needs to go towards your future retirement, right? So one, live below your means. Number two, we say invest the rest, right? A lot of times people are not investing because they don't have any money left over at the end of the month. After their paycheck comes, they pay all of their bills and living expenses, and there's no money left over. So you cannot build wealth if you don't have any money left over to purchase the shares and the equities and the stocks, right? So you have to remember to always do those two things, okay? And I'll just talk really quickly when I mentioned lifestyle inflation. So that means I have to be very intentional about when I get extra money. I need to already have a plan in place for how I'm going to allocate that extra money, because it is very easy for you to get a windfall of money. You know, unexpected money comes to you. Yes, I pray that happens to all of us, right? Everyone listening, that you get an unexpected check in the mail. But if you do not have a plan for how you are going to allocate that money, it is very easy for that money to be used on things that are not going to help you reach your long-term financial goals. Okay. So that's why I say that one of the most important things that we can do in a fluctuating economy is to learn how to create a conscious spending plan, AKA the budget, learn how to stick to it and live on it. Okay. That is going to pay you in so many dividends. It is such a huge investment that you can make, and it's something everybody can do. Of course, we all have different numbers, but it's something that we can all do. Okay. So I just wanted to say one more thing, and then I'm just going to open up my budget to show you that. So the thing too with, again, because I want you guys to believe in index funds the same way I do. We look at the Dow Jones, right? It's like sometimes when we're listening to the news and we're like, oh, the Dow Jones was up, the Dow Jones is down. Okay. The Dow Jones Industrial Average, when it was first started, I think the guy's name was like Charles Dew. But anyways, he started it with just like a few stocks. Maybe it was like 12. Don't quote me on this. You have to look it up, but it was not a lot of stocks. Okay. Today, the Dow Jones Industrial Average, it still is in existence, but none of the original companies exist anymore, right? They don't exist anymore. So the Dow Jones, the first group of stocks, it was created as a proxy for the entire stock market, okay? But those stocks do not exist anymore. So think this, and this is good, because when you think of index funds, right, there's another index fund that Vanguard has, and it's called, I have to look up the ticker symbol, but it represents the S&P 500. Okay, so the S&P 500 index fund, and you could find this at Fidelity, you can find it at Charles Schwab, any brokerage account. If you're not sure, you can call them up and you can say, what is the ticker symbol for your index fund that represents the total stock market or the S&P 500? So the S&P 500, it contains the 500 best stocks, right? The best companies. The 500 best companies are in the S&P 500. So it's self-cleansing. That's what an index fund is. It's self-cleansing. That's why I prefer that over investing in an individual stock. Because if a company is not doing well, right? They're not doing well and they're no longer part of the top 500, guess what? They're going to drop off the S&P 500 and they're going to be replaced by the company that is doing well enough to be considered in the top 500. Okay, so self-cleansing. I mean, you can't get better than that. And I'm sure all of you listening are similar to me, where you have a lot going on. You might have children, you might have aging parents, you might have, a community, not-for-profits, you're on a board, you volunteer, you have a church, you have a synagogue, a mosque. You are involved, right? You're being stretched thin. Your time is valuable. Maybe you don't have time to research individual stocks. You don't have to. You can invest in index funds, right? So if we can take one thing off of our list, our long to-do list, why not do that? Okay. So make things easy for yourself. I like the acronym KISS, right? Keep it simple, sweetheart, right? Or keep it simple, sister, whatever it stands for. But as much as you can, keep it simple. Okay. So I compare this whole thing with the stock market. When I was speaking to Madison, and she was saying, so many people watch like the first one, and I was like, wow, I can't believe so many people came to the first presentation. That's excellent. And so so then I was like, yeah. So I don't know why I assumed everyone was like local. I'm in New York State. I'm in upstate New York, and so the thing with upstate New York is that it always snows, right? It will snow in the winter. It can be spring and it can be cold. Like we just had Memorial Day and we were cold, right? It was raining up until then. So it wasn't that nice, right? But I live in New York State and I've lived here all of my life. So it's expected, right? So that's what we have to see when we look at the stock market. When it goes up and when it goes down, and when people are saying, oh my gosh, it's going to crash, oh my gosh, the sky is falling, this time it's different, that is expected. Okay. You have to go in to your investing journey knowing that all of these things that you are going to hear, it is expected, it is normal. Okay. So all of the stuff, the media will convince you that it is not normal and that you should be scared. But that you have to understand, who is the messenger, right? Who is giving this message? What is their intent? Their intent is to keep their ratings up, right? To have you glued to the TV. And you have to understand and just recognize that. Okay. So the most important takeaway from my talk is that what you will do when the market is collapsing, when it's going down, that is where the wealth is made. So a lot of people will pull out of the market when they hear all of the stuff that we're all hearing. But the people that stay in the market, it's like a roller coaster, right? It's like the Wild West out here, right? It is going to be a bumpy, wild ride. Okay. I am not saying that it's not going to be. I'm saying stay strapped in to your seat while you are on this wild road, because it will go up. If I could title this presentation, for my ending remarks, it will say, it will go up. You need to stay invested. Do not pull out. Okay. So the other thing about, wow, I'm talking a lot about investing. I didn't even get really to the budgeting part yet. But the other thing that I wanted to mention is, so many people, they lose money, right? And it's not because of the stock market doing what the stock market does. It's due to their own psychological thoughts that cause their actions, right? For them to jump out of the market. Okay. So you have to ask yourself these questions, right? You say, am I in the wealth building stage or am I in the wealth preservation stage, right? Or maybe you're a blend, right? What is your level of acceptable risk? And also, is your investment horizon long-term or short-term? So for me, where I am in my life, I'm in the wealth building stage. Okay. So again, I'm not, I will share with anyone who wants to know, 100% in VTSAX, because I'm in the wealth building stage. And again, the US economy, of course, it has its faults. There's Enron, there's all these things that will happen. It is not perfect, but compared to other world markets, the US is the cleanest. Okay. So so much wealth can be made in the stock market. Again, we're not trying to get rich quickly, right? Because usually when you get rich quickly, that's usually not the best way, because you will mistake your luck for skill, right? And you don't want to do that. Okay. Another statistic I will tell you when it comes to like luck and skill is, again, and I'm not trying to say anything negative about fund managers, but know the statistic. Only 20% of fund managers will beat the index over time. 80% will fail. Sometimes you might be tempted to work with a firm, because they might be saying in their commercials or, in their brochures, they will say, we beat the index, over time. You've always got to read the fine print. Always have to read it. But 100% of the time they are going to charge you a fee, right, for the chance to try. But you know what? Index funds, you do not need an advisor. That's why they're so accessible. Everybody can open them. Okay. And like I said, if you don't have a $3,000 minimum, you can open up an EFT. An ETF, an exchange traded fund. And then once you get to that $3,000 minimum, you can then, change your ETF for a regular index fund. Okay. So things just to keep in mind, because inflation is going to happen. You're going to hear the reports. We're going to always have an administration in power, and there's going to be a lot of people, no matter who is in charge, people are going to say, they're not doing it right. They're causing this. They're the cause of that. Not even just the administration, but on every level, right? There's always going to be that. So we just need to recognize that that is always going to happen. Okay. And it's so important to build up our muscles and the infrastructure, because this is a journey. We're in it for the long haul, right? We're not trying to get rich quickly. And I don't think I mentioned this, but the other thing that I wanted to mention before I move on is expense ratio. So your expense ratio, when you are buying an equity or a stock, you're paying an expense ratio. That's another reason why I like index funds, because they have low expense ratios. So when you're looking at stocks, learn what the expense ratio is. I talk to so many people, and fees is like a big thing to me, because you can put in all this hard work. You can live below your means. You can budget. You can get out of debt. That takes a lot of work. That takes a lot of discipline. So I want you to be rewarded for your discipline. I don't want you to be giving all of your hard-earned money over to, the investment management firm, right? So keep as much of it as you can. But if you don't even know how much you are paying, that is a problem. So if you're not even sure, call and just say, what is the expense ratio for the stocks that I have? Okay. So like I said, most index funds at Vanguard, especially BTSAX, I think the expense ratio is 0.04%. So that's a good expense ratio. Okay. You're not really going to find too much lower than that. Okay. But you can definitely find higher than that. And that's not something that we want. Okay. So the other thing I wanted to mention is budgeting, right? Or the conscious spending plan. So this is so important, because the conscious spending plan is what is going to get us to where we are going. Okay. So a conscious spending plan, AKA the budget, it is a path for you to be very strategic and intentional when it comes to meeting your financial goals. Okay. So in order to do this, it is powerful what you write down on purpose on paper. So before the month begins, you should have a zero-based budget written down on paper, or you could use your spreadsheet. Okay. You can do this on your spreadsheet. You could do this on an app. You can just use pen to paper. Okay. You can do all of these different things. It's not really the method, but it's the methodology. Okay. So it doesn't really matter if it's pen, paper, app, or anything else like that. But what matters is the method that you are using. So how does a zero-based budget work? Let's just say you bring in, again, this is just an example. Let's just say you bring in $1,000. Okay. So if I'm bringing in $1,000 every month as my income, I need to make sure that every dollar has a specific job, a specific purpose. Okay. Think of them as soldiers, right? Like, sometimes when I'm listening to people, who are worried and stressed out about their finances, they're like, I feel like I'm being attacked. Like this is a war, right? Against my financial well-being. So if that's you, think of every dollar as a soldier. Okay. So you are in charge of the soldiers. You're like the general or the sergeant, right? And so what you need to do is to make sure that every $1,000 that's coming in represents a soldier. So every single soldier needs to have a job and a purpose, right? You don't want some of these soldiers doing nothing, because if you're in a war, they need to be working, right? So every single one needs to have a job. So what you're saying is you are assigning them a job and a purpose before the month begins. So some of those soldiers, some of those dollars, some of them should be going to investing, right? Some of them, at least one or two, preferably more, but as many as you can should go towards investing in your financial future. And then other ones are going to take care of the mortgage or the rent or your car payment, right? Or they're going to put food on your table. They're going to put gas in your car, right? So you need to make sure that every dollar has a job, right? We say no dollar left behind. So you do not want to start the month before you have given every dollar a job to do. It is so powerful when you put pen to paper. Okay, when you put pen to paper and say, this is how I'm going to spend my money, allocate my money, you are way more likely to stick to that plan. Okay, so the zero-based budgeting process basically says if I'm bringing in $1,000, I need to put on paper how I'm going to spend that $1,000. And so it doesn't mean that I'm going to just spend all of my money. We're saying we're allocating it. So some of that money is going to be allocated towards getting out of debt if you have, high debt. Some of that money is going towards creating an emergency fund, right? Because you have to have a savings account and it needs to be funded, right? So if you only have $1 in your savings account, that's not good. So some of the money needs to go towards building a fully funded emergency fund, okay? And of course, like I said, some of it is going towards your basic living expenses, your bills, and of course, some of your wants too. So just because you're on a budget, it doesn't mean that you're not going to enjoy life anymore. You're still going to be spending money on your wants. The difference is that you are being very strategic and you're taking care of your needs first. So you're first saying, first, I'm taking care of my needs. And I'm also investing, because that should be considered a need, because you're thinking of the needs of your future self, right? And then with the money that I have left over, I'm also going to put that towards the things that I like to do, my wants, right? So that can include Starbucks. That can include getting your nails done. That can include buying a new shirt or whatever it is that you like to spend money on, right? Don't let someone tell you that you shouldn't buy certain things. You should buy what you want to buy, but just make sure that you're also taking care of your financial well-being first, okay? Prioritize your own financial well-being. So that means getting out of debt, saving, investing. That's all a part of that, right? That's all a part of that financial self-care that we're talking about, okay? So we are going to do that, and we are putting boundaries in place. So a budget is really helping us put in place boundaries, okay? So the nice thing about putting it all on paper first is that you can see how much money you have spent, okay? And I'm going to send to Madison a copy of my budget, and I'm giving it to you as a gift. And so please take that and you can play around with it, and you can see how a zero-based budget works, okay? But basically, if you bring in 1,000 and if you don't give $1,000 a name, it's not a zero-based budget. So sometimes this is what people do. They will have a zero-based budget, they think, and they're like, okay, my income is $1,000, and they pay their bills, and they do everything they need to do, and they allocated only $900 of those dollars, okay? So then they have $100 left over, right? Like a $100 surplus. And they're like, oh, that's great. I'm winning, I'm doing well with my finances. You're not doing well, because that's not a zero-based budget. The $100 that you did not give a name to, it doesn't have a purpose, and it's not going to help you fulfill your financial your financial future to get to where you want to be financially in the future, unless you give every dollar a name. So that $100 that doesn't have a name, it's going to go somewhere, right? It's going to leave your hands, and it's going to be spent or given away, or it's going to leave your hands, right? But you want it to leave your hands with purpose. You want to be intentional, right? So put that $100 back into your budget and give it a name. And the nice thing about personal finance, like we keep saying, it's personal. So you can do whatever you want with that money. So Like I said, if it was me, I would first say, am I investing enough? Do I need to add this money to my savings? Do I need to add this money to my debt payoff strategy? And maybe you're not, maybe you're going to put a little bit towards each of those things. And you don't have to put all of it towards those things, because you can also have fun with it. Maybe you can say half of it is going to go towards something fun, right? Some of it's going to go towards my vacation fund. Okay. So you have the power to control your personal finances. There are a lot of things that we cannot control, but creating and living off of a conscious spending plan, our zero-based budget, is something that everyone can do. Okay, so I hope that was helpful. And like I said, I'm going to share my budget, my template with Madison. And so if you're interested in that, or you can email me directly, whatever works, but we'll make sure we get that to you, so you can see how the zero-based budget works. And that's the way that I personally do my budget. So I think it's been about an hour. Yeah. So anyways, if you have any questions, feel free, to let me know what your questions are. I'll get back to you. If you try the budget and you're like, I'm not sure what to do, you're welcome to email me as well. So again, I apologize about the technical difficulties, but thank you for listening to this message. And thank you, Madison and the Center for Cybersecurity, for putting these talks on. So again, I'm Angela Tatum, and my organization is You Inc. Wealth Education Services, and we're on, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, all those things.
All right. Thank you so much, Angela. That was great. And as she mentioned, to everyone that I'll be emailing after that signed up for the webinar, I will be attaching her budget, and then you guys can email me with any questions and I'll pass them along to Angela. So thank you so much, Angela.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Madison.